And Yvonne asked me today to share a few memories from a little bit different perspective. Most of you knew Bob as either a Mr. Gomez teacher or a mentor, or a Bob as a neighbor or a friend. But Ray and I had the pleasure of sharing memories with Bob and Yvonne as vacation companions. One of my first memories was a band trip, actually, and not just a trip with the four of us. We had gone in 1981 up to Canada, and Bob somehow talked Yvonne and I into getting into this gondola and getting up to the top of Grouse Mountain. Now, you couldn't see how tall it was because there were a lot of clouds around, but we got into the gondola, and we didn't care too much for the towers. We said, how many towers are there? 3. 10 towers later, we got to the top of Grouse Mountain. And the whole time we were going up there, he said, it's okay, girls, it's okay. Once we get up there, I'll buy you a Mexican coffee. So, okay, we get up there, get out of the gondola, and it is snowing. It's ice cold. Yvonne and I hustle into the lodge, and Bob comes in a few minutes. He says, what are you two doing? We said, we're waiting for our Mexican coffee. Well, you can't do that. There are students here. You can't have that Mexican coffee. But he made up for that much later in Clear Lake. Another recollection of a band trip was in Catalina. We had taken the band there after a tour of Disneyland, and we were kind of roaming through the streets of Catalina looking for a place to have lunch. Found a restaurant that had dining out on the back, overlooking the water. We go out there and sit down, and we order lunch. I order iced tea, Bob orders a beer, and we're sitting there having lunch, looking at the water. All of a sudden, Bob grabs my iced tea and shoves his beer in my hand. And it's like, okay, And he said, well, there are students over there. and they're reading the menu, and they might come in here. And so he gets up with my iced tea to go to chat with them, and so I took the hit for the beer that day. Bob and Yvonne were thoughtful enough to share a Maui with Ray and I several times, and I always got a kick out of Bob because he had the same routine every morning. Bob and I were early risers, so he would get up and put on his shirts, t-shirt, and his visor, sandals, and he'd go outside, and we'd have our early morning palm tree. He'd just, be under the palm tree. Then we'd have our mid-morning palm tree. We had our noon palm tree, and then we kind of went over and we had our mid-afternoon palm tree. And he'd come back later in the afternoon and be beet red, just beet red, glowing, and the next day it was a perfect tan. And as much as he loved Hawaii, that man never went in the water. Maybe up to his ankles, but he never went in the water. Another favorite memory with Bob and Yvonne, and I believe Helen and Bob Gross, who are here today. For several years, we would celebrate New Year's up at Blue Lake Springs. And we'd try to rent the same cabin. Sometimes we had different cabins, but every year we'd go up there. And this one particular year, it was freezing, it was snowing. I have a picture board over in the hall, you'll see. We have, snow all over. Got up one morning and there was no power. And so Bob proceeded to cook us breakfast, bacon and eggs and coffee in the fireplace. And I kind of thought that was the first Top Chef challenge there. My last memory is probably the most recent as a gathering. 2 years ago, my husband had a wonderful birthday party for me at a restaurant in downtown San Jose. We had about 30 guests, and we had a private room. And my daughter had printed up menus. There was just a long menu, and at each guest's place, we had the menu. And you had 3 choices for appetizer, 3 choices for an entree, and you had 3 choices for a dessert. Well, Bob picks his up and looks at it, and he says, I'm going to eat all this? And we said, no, Bob, you can order. These are your choices. He says, oh, like a cruise ship. And I thought, or like a restaurant. But as you can see, no matter what we did, where we went, you could always count on an amusing memory to bring home as a souvenir, and I'll treasure ours.